I I haven't done a live on LinkedIn at least for weeks and weeks and weeks. It feels like so I'm doing another one now. I'm doing another few actually, but in a few minutes, as soon as I know that I'm live, I'm going to be live with Lisa Robyn Wood. As soon as we're actually live, I will tag Lisa. That tells me that I'm live, so I need to make sure my sound is off on that device. As I always do at the beginning of this, I'm just doing a couple of technical things down in the bottom, down on my laptop and that sort of thing. If you are watching us live, could you do me a favour and actually say something? Type me a comment, say hello, let me know that you're there. If you've got any questions for Lisa once I bring her on screen, pop those in the comments as well and we'll answer those. Hey, we've already got Donna McGrath. Hey, Donna, it's good to see you. It's nice to see that we've already got some people here. There you go, Donna. Thank you for letting me know that you're here already this afternoon. Let's make sure, I'm going to do a couple of things here. I'm going to make sure that I have actually tagged Lisa in this so that she can talk to some of the people who join us. There we go. I've done that. And then I'm going to make sure that I share this into one place. I I end up being my own tech op on this as well, so I have to make sure that Stephen Lai, I was talking to you earlier on. It's lovely to see you. Let's do that. Hey, Stephen, it's good to see you. And then I'm going to share this into a group, and then once I've done all of that, I'm going to bring Lisa onto screen as well. So, hey, Kirsty, it's been a while. Kirsty, I've still got the beanie hat somewhere in this room, actually. Kirsty knows what that means. And Marcus, it's good to see you as well. It's great to see, as hot as it is outside, that a load of you have chosen to spend some time with us this afternoon. So, I'm going to be talking to Lisa Robyn Wood, who I'm bringing on screen any second now. Lisa is a leadership coach with a hell of a story, a performance coach, someone who just talks a load of sense because her coaching background, her coaching story comes from a place of real life. So let's bring Lisa on screen. Hello, how are you doing?
Hey, hello, hello.
So I've given you a bit of an introduction, but I always want to make sure that I've introduced people in a way that makes sense to them. So for the benefit of the people who are watching us and listening to us this afternoon, just give us your own introduction. Let us know a little bit about you, Lisa, and what you do.
Oh, thank you very much. Well, it's great to be here, and thank you to everyone who's joined us this afternoon. I really appreciate it, and looking forward to getting to know you all a little bit better, I hope. But yes, so I'm a professional performance coach. I work with managers who are very much in that stage of their career where they're wanting to improve their skills around managing people. And that's really been born, I feel, from my own journey in management and leadership. So I spent, gosh, over 15 years in corporate, working for various different, well known, I would say, UK brands. And that's where I really forged my own management and leadership career. And that's kind of led me to where I am now. More recently, in the last couple of years, I actually stepped into hospitality to really become an entrepreneur myself, I guess, managing a pub with my husband here in the Cotswolds, which is where I'm based, and at the same time launching my coaching freelance business and also my podcast, which is called The Coaching Cast, which is with my podcast partner extraordinaire, Susie. And together we very much focus our skills in coaching and leadership around how we can support people who are working remotely from home, who are still wanting to learn and grow their skills as people managers in a sort of welcoming, fun environment that hopefully is relatable with some of the silly stories that I share.
I just, whilst you were chatting, I'm going to put it back up there. I've just put the coaching cast up there.
Yes, fab.
If
And my
people
mug.
want
I've got my
to,
mug with me.
you've got. Oh, hold on, you're not on screen at the moment. So people, there you go.
Oh,
There's the mug.
sorry.
You're
There's the
back
mug.
now. I'll keep reminding you when you're on screen and when you're not. The Coaching Cast podcast, thecoachingcast.co.uk, where Lisa and her partner Susie give a load of advice out there. I am. I know this. I know this part of the story, but give us a little indication as to, or a little part of your story about how you actually came into coaching yourself, because I know that comes from a very real place for you.
Yeah, so I had been working for a corporate organisation for a number of years and been fortunate to be successful in that organisation, being promoted to a number of different roles. And it was in 2014 that I'd been promoted to a senior leadership role, managing managers and other teams of people. And despite going through the process of securing that promotion, both in terms of the physical interview and the assessments, and not to mention the reputation I'd forged in the years before that and what I'd delivered, I felt a complete fraud in this particular role. So I didn't feel equipped to do it well. And I do generally have a belief that if I can't do something to the, I would say, 100% best of my capability and be really enjoying it, then I don't really want to do it. And I mean, that in itself is probably like a whole nother issue to explore on another day, because it's a bit of a work in progress, that one. But I suppose what I'm trying to articulate is that something was not right and I could not work out what it was. Now, I classify myself as someone who has a strong sense of self. I generally know the way I feel about things and why I feel that way. But in this particular instance, I didn't. And over time, it really chipped away at my confidence and my self belief because I just felt lost. Now, I think in years since, I've realised from things I've read and other people's experiences that it was likely I was suffering with what we now call imposter syndrome. And it didn't matter how other people perceived me and what they felt I was delivering. I didn't align with them. I didn't feel positive, and I just got myself into a state where I was getting ready to quit my job. And it was a job in a company that was fantastic. I didn't really have an obvious reason to quit. And actually, that is really in the end why I didn't, because logic prevailed. And I went, but I don't know why I'm going. And so what am I going to go on to? And to be honest, this went on for nearly 12 months. And it was my dad who said, why don't you employ a coach to work with you? And I was just like, oh God, no, I don't want any of that sort of fluffy self-help. I'm just not interested in it. It's not for me. But to be honest, I got desperate and thought, well, I've got nothing left to lose. I need to try something, because I felt by that point I tried loads of different things and hadn't been successful. And so that's exactly what I did. I found a lady online who was local to me, who I really liked the sound of, who was a qualified coach. And I contacted her and liked the sound of her. She sounded like my kind of person. And I think that's so important when you're seeking support from others, is that you actually feel connected to the person who's going to be helping you, because you're entrusting them with you and your thoughts and your feelings. You're being vulnerable to them. And I had one session with her and it completely transformed my life from that point forwards. I realized in the time that I had with her exactly what was wrong. I mean, I was only there for an hour and a half, but she
And it was
asked
that
me,
profound in that 90 minutes then. It was that
yeah, she
profound an
asked
experience.
me, yeah, absolutely, because I think it was a couple of things. Gave me the space to talk aloud what was going on, and it was probably the first time I'd done that with someone who was completely unbiased, had nothing to do with it. Your friends and family want the best for you. So do sometimes your colleagues you work with, I would like to hope all the time. But they're too subjective because they know you so well. And despite everyone's best intentions, everyone wants to give you advice and tell you what you should do. And that doesn't always work very well, because they're not you, and they're actually not the expert of you at all. So actually what I needed at the time was someone just to listen to me, ask me some questions, and get me thinking differently, to work out what the hell was going on. And it was such a transformative experience for me that I was able to retain my job. I didn't leave. I was able to identify what I really wanted to do. And actually, one of the biggest things was that actually the job just wasn't right for me in that organisation. So I'll go and seek another one. Um, and the most important part for this story, I guess, and why we're here, is I realised that as a leader, coaching was the skill I was lacking. And I thought, do you know what? This is a skill that all leaders and managers should have who are working with people, because it's that powerful. It can help everybody. And this is something I've never been taught throughout my whole organic journey growing as a manager and into a leader. But it's absolutely what I think could transform how successful I am, and how much more I can give back to those that I manage. And I can actually really fully support them and develop them and help them grow.
Marcus Grodance has, hi Cressy, Cressy, who's actually not far away from you and I. Lisa Cressy is in the Cotswolds as well. Marcus has asked a question, just popping it up on screen. Qualified coach. I don't know whether Marcus means the person who was coaching you or the coach that you've become, Lisa. So maybe that pretty much leads. I think that links us to the next part of the story anyway.
Probably.
Yeah, I think it does. If you talk about sort of what you've done I don't know what the relevant qualifications would be, but perhaps you can talk about what you've done, or how qualified your coach was, whichever one of those is more relevant. Where did that lead you to when you decided to become a coach? How did you prepare for that?
So, quite simply, I thought my coach was so amazing, that I wanted to understand how she had become a coach and with whom. Because, yes, she was a qualified coach. By qualified, I mean she has been trained to a nationally recognised standard and approval, and gone through the necessary assessments to pass, if you like, a qualification. Now, she'd gone and got qualified with an organisation called the Coaching Academy, who are based in London. They're one of the larger providers in the UK. And quite simply, I thought, well, she's amazing. And she recommended their training. And I thought, well, I'll just go to them. And that was about it. So I have got a diploma, and that's what it's, a diploma equivalent in corporate and executive coaching from the Coaching Academy. On top of that, I have a practitioner certificate in neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, which I know has a mixed reputation globally, because of, I think, people's misconceptions of NLP, because it is about the study of language, quite largely, and which is fascinating to me. But I think in the past, people have felt that individuals have used it in a manipulative sense, which I have no personal experience of. I can only rave positively about NLP. And I'm also a DISC practitioner, and some people may be aware of DISC, which is a personality tool. I mean, there are many out there like Myers-Briggs and Insights, and, to name a few. But yes, but I am qualified. So that was really important for me, because, and it kind of goes back to my point I made earlier about, if I'm going to do something, I want to do it to the absolute best of my capability, because I really want to do it well. And coaching, when I was introduced to it, was not a technique or a skill that anyone had ever spoken to me about before. So I might have been a manager of people for, gosh, probably by that point, at least 7 years, but no one had ever talked to me about coaching. And I genuinely knew that at that point, I wanted to train in it and be taught to do it properly, so I could do it really well. And so I could improve my own natural set of skills, because, and I'm sure you'll be getting this at the moment, I am a natural talker. I'm not a natural listener, and I know I'm not. So being a really great, authentic coach requires you to listen, and to listen really 70 to 80% of the time that you spend with your coachees. So it was definitely a skill I knew I needed to grow. And again, I wanted to be taught, well, how can I do that? And what can I do differently? So yeah, the training part of it was super important for me. And I continued to train. So, learning, it's interesting. When I graduated university, which is a long time ago now, I vowed that I would never study formally ever again. I was kind of done with it by that point. Well, when I discovered coaching, it reignited my thirst for knowledge and growth and learning, and I haven't stopped since. And that was, oh God, like 7 years ago. So I've gone on every year. I generally do something more or different, or but I would strongly advise anyone who's looking for a coach is go for the guys and the gals who are qualified professionally, because they are the ones that have gone out, they've invested in themselves, they've got the formal training from the accredited schools, and they've gone through assessments. My formal training, I had to demonstrate coaching in practice with assessors to show that I could fulfill the principles and follow the code of ethics of coaching, of which that's really important, because you are entrusted with people's well-being when you work with them as a coach. It's not a formalized therapy, it's not medical by any stretch, but you are supporting an individual and they are expecting you to support them, and that is a big responsibility. So I would urge anyone to go for a qualified coach with one of the many accredited schools out there, whether they're ICF accredited, that's the International Coaching Federation, which mine is, or EMCC, that's European. But there's so many people out there, I think, at the moment who call themselves coaches and they charge a lot of money, but they're not formally qualified. So just be careful.
I'm just going to pop this up on screen and say that I'm talking to Lisa Robyn Wood. If you've just joined us, which I know a number of people have, we're talking about coaching, and Lisa's been explaining her journey and what some of the Marcus kindly asked a question about qualified coaches, and Marcus goes on to say so many organisations offering coaching qualifications. So Lisa's been talking about that. We're going to talk about what coaching actually means to people, but importantly, if you're not already following Lisa, there she is on LinkedIn. That's where you'll find her. I strongly suggest you do follow her, because she puts a ton of advice and knowledge out there, and she shouts me out every so often as well, which I'm really grateful for. I'm going to pop us back on screen for a second. And yeah, I think, Marcus asked the question, and then the wonderful Cressy has gone on to say, yeah, she agrees that it's essential for a coach to be trained. I think your point about having
Hi,
people's
Cressy.
well, yeah, I think your point about having people's well-being at hand is is really worth people bearing in mind. So you've talked about your journey. You've talked about your qualifications. It was great that we got the prompt for that. If anyone's got any questions, pop them in the comments below. I'll bring them up on screen and we'll try and answer them. What is coaching then? For you were new to it until your dad suggested it. For someone who has heard of the expression but doesn't really know what it means, what does it mean?
Yeah, and I think this is such a great question, because so many people ask this because they truly don't know. I know when I was training to be qualified, right at the very beginning, one of my managers at the time, because I remained working in the organisation as I studied, because I played sport as well, he just went, "Oh, right, so you're training to coach for netball?" And I was like, "No, it's got nothing to do with netball." I said, "I'm coaching because I want to increase my skills to support and help people grow as part of my leadership style." And he was an experienced leader in our organisation at the time, and even he didn't seem to really get the link between coaching and leadership. So, I mean, for me, coaching is all about supporting individuals to achieve their goals quicker than if they tried to do it by themselves. And goals is a word that can jar with people, but you can replace that with your targets, your objectives, your dreams. In other words, if you know you want something, but you're unsure how to achieve it, a coach will support you to create the understanding, the clarity, and build a plan to get it. And it's simply the act of facilitating and enabling an individual to think differently. You know, one of my coaching trainers, who is absolutely exceptional, who I've had many times teach me things in my career, did simplify it for me I felt very helpfully once, which was, you know, if an individual leaves thinking differently with new ideas and ways that they can do things compared to how they arrived, in other words, if you've enabled them to become unstuck, then actually you did your job as a coach. Now, I think one thing I will stress is within that journey, it is about the individual who is being coached doing the thinking. So it is not about giving advice. And I think often coaches and mentors get confused.
I'm just going to, because because Ed, the wonderful Edward Zia, has just joined us from Sydney, and in the past I have mentored Ed, and Ed has mentored me, and it is the two words get confused by people, don't they? And
Yeah.
and the two words get used interchangeably, where in fact they're not, because Ed has specifically given me advice based on his experience, and I've done the same with Ed, and yet actually from a coach's point of view, that's different to what a coach does.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a coach really is about enabling the individual to be empowered, which is a big word. I'm going to come back to it, to take action for themselves based on what they want and the decisions they've made. Now, that for me is more powerful than mentoring, because in some ways, I'm not saying mentoring doesn't have a place, because it does. Otherwise, you know, I wouldn't work with mentors myself. But the difference is that individual is learning in a much more, I would say, permanent way as they're thinking, because it's all coming from them. And so from my personal experience, it's never left me. I suppose that's the strongest thing I can advocate around it. I will never forget how I felt after that first session. I will never forget how it made me realise how truly capable I am, because I came up with the answers and solutions in that session based on the questions she asked me. And yes, they were challenging questions, but quite rightly so, because that's what I needed at the time to get me out of my, funk, if you like. I was thinking only in one way because that was at the time all I knew how to do. And actually, with her having a completely different perspective from a completely different place, being a stranger as well, who didn't know me and I didn't know her, but knowing she was there to support me to get out of this, she asked me questions that got me unstuck. I changed my pattern of thought. And it really left me feeling that I could do what I wanted and that I was powerful. And I think I was always told that leaders, this is in my junior management career, leaders empower people. But no one ever told me what that actually meant and how to do it. And I was frustrated with this for a long time until coaching came along, and I realised that actually empowering people is giving them the space to think for themselves and try things out, take responsibility for it, and see what happens without being told what to do, how to do it, and actually the learning you get from those types of experiences, and I'm sure everyone here can relate to this in some way, the learning you get from that is so deep and can be so broad, but it is permanent. It stays with you, and that's the beauty of it. I think mentoring is great in so much as it's brilliant to learn from other people and how they do things, but the only part of it that I would say you always have to watch out for is that you are not them and they are not you, and what may have worked for them might not necessarily be true for you. So I think it's sometimes looking at them in partnership that actually they can both work nicely together.
I'm going to pop this back up on the screen for a second and make absolutely sure that people are following you. And I'm going to absolutely suggest that we clip what you've just said out and make sure that you put it out there literally all over the place, because that bit about, just be very careful that you understand that a mentor isn't you and you're not the mentor, a something that I've absolutely known in the past. Look, if you're not following Lisa, please, here's Lisa on LinkedIn. This is where to follow her. If you've got any questions or any comments that you want to put in the comments, do, and we'll answer your questions. We'll bring your comments up on screen. But I've had quite often unsolicited advice thrown at me over the years, Lisa, and of course it's come from the right place, from the people giving it, that they want the best for me, but equally they're basing it exactly on them. They're basing it on their experience. And what you're saying is that your coach for you, and now you with other people, you help to show people that they have the answers themselves, and that must be incredibly empowering as well. Let's take that off the screen and I'll put Lisa back on. That must be incredibly empowering for them to know that they did know the answers all the way along.
Yeah, without a doubt. And you are right. People do give advice, and it does come. I genuinely do think from a place of support and from wanting to help others. Like, I think there are very few of us that aren't in that frame of mind. Like, when someone's being challenged, we want to support and help, but we do sometimes jump to a place of "let me fix it for you," without
Yeah.
realizing how disempowering that is. You know, it's not always about saving somebody. That doesn't always help them. And if we're really about supporting people's confidence and resilience and capabilities, it's about helping them to see the way for themselves and to support them to do that. I mean, you can still support, but it's just, you can support in a different way. Like, ask them a question, help them to think differently, give them the space to think it through. I think there's nothing. I think there's not necessarily a stronger way to help someone feel valued than listening to them. I don't think. I know for me personally, anyway. And that's what really helps people, I think, to grow. And I have to admit, when I started learning about coaching and started training myself and I started utilizing it, I started recognizing the techniques in some of the leaders in my organization who I respected and appreciated the most. And I realized that actually that's what made them great. It was that they were, whether they knew it or not, I mean, they were either intentionally coaching because they knew how to, or they were naturally in that, they had that natural skill of being able to ask questions, explore, be curious, and listen really well. But that's what made them so brilliant. And that was what I was like, oh my God, all this time I had no idea that that's what they were doing. And now I know how to do it. I just want to do it more because I've got role models and I want to be as good as they are to support other people.
Because something that I absolutely know, and you and I have talked about this previously, is that in my previous career in a state agency, people were often promoted to managers because they were good at selling stuff, and they became leaders in the organisation because actually their core skill was selling. Entrepreneurs often end up as leaders without really knowing how they got there, but you take on it. I run a membership community. Edward runs a membership community. We have members. We have people who look to us for leadership. We have suppliers that we have to deal with. People in network marketing organisations, when they become successful, they become leaders because you've used the word. And very often, the support is all there to sell more stuff, but actually how to inspire, motivate, work with the people around you, that's a skill that's often missing. And I think you're not only saying that it's the management skills, but I don't think I've known any organisation in the corporate world who really trains their manager in coaching skills. So that feels like that bit's missing.
Yeah, I mean, this is something I could literally talk to you about this for hours because I think it's the gap that's out there that no one's filling. there are organisations that talk about coaching, but not in a dedicated, focused way for their managers, no. And I do think it is the glaringly obvious thing that all managers should be taught because of what it gives them. Because it's not just a skill that helps others, it really helps and supports the individual who is learning to be a coach. Because you learn so much about yourself through the process. You know, you learn so much about the principles of coaching and how it grows an individual self-awareness, because the more questions that they're asked and the more they go through the process of coaching, the more they realize about themselves. You know, the more they identify what's really important to them, and you know, the way they think and potentially why they even think that way, and they have the opportunity to adjust that as they see fit or accentuate elements of it, you know. So as you're learning to be a coach, you do all of that for yourself at the same time, and you increase your awareness therefore of other people, and you focus heavily on how you're communicating with people and how you're building a relationship. And for me, relationships are the foundation of everything in our lives, whether that be in personal or work. It's all the same for me. How you relate to others is such a important part of all of it, and it's a skill that I don't think any of us are ever actually taught. Some of us are naturally good at it, some of us are better at it than others, some of us love it so much that's where we dedicate our focus, but it's not something we're taught particularly well. And again, for me, this is where coaching comes in to plug that gap, because it is all about communication, you know, both the listening side of it and the verbal. And if more managers were taught that as they grew, I think it would make them into much more effective managers of people, and managers who are actually happier. I think this is something that doesn't really get talked a lot about, but that is that actually being a manager is really hard work, and it's a tough space to be in, especially when things aren't going well. And managing others and being around people and trying to juggle all of their wants, desires, aspirations, problems, you know, it's a hell of a lot of responsibility. And I don't think enough is done to really look after the managers in that space who are managing up, down, left, right, to look after themselves, to be able to look after other people. And so many managers do get burnt out. They deal heavily with stress. A lot of them hate their job. You know, I saw a stat the other day that says, you know, a vast majority of managers at the moment don't want to be managers anymore. And
Do
I think
you?
after the last couple of years, I'm not really surprised. But, you know, that's sad to me, because actually being a manager, you know, whether you're a leader, a manager, an entrepreneur, you know, all of that, I mean, it has the potential to be such an amazing opportunity for you and to give you so much fulfillment and growth and experiences and reward. So we should be tapping more into how do we help all those individuals to be able to get all of that then, and actually look after and support them. And I just think for me, coaching is what could absolutely do that. It definitely was what was missing for me, and I personally sought it out. I found it and I invested in it. But that shouldn't be the case, I don't think.
Unless people want to work with you, in which case it definitely should be the case.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah.
People should come and seek you out. There you go. That's an opportunity for me to put that back up on the screen as well. People should come and seek you out. You've just used the expression "managing up," and I thought that I was the only person in the world who used that expression, because when I work with leaders and managers in some of my roles, mainly in the sort of sales and mentoring side of things, I explain to them that they have to manage up, that they have to manage their own managers as well.
Oh God,
But
yeah, absolutely.
so often people don't get that. I am talking for the benefit of the people who are watching. I'm talking to Lisa Robyn Wood. If you've just joined us, if you've got any questions, pop them in the comments below. If you're not already following Lisa on LinkedIn, that's where to find her. And if you've got any questions, we'll bring them up on screen. But I'll bring us back up on screen now. I am not, just so that everyone knows, I'm not putting the slides up every so often just so that Lisa and I can grab a glass of water and do whatever we need to cool down whilst you're not looking at us, because we're both here in West Oxfordshire, where it is really, really, I know it's hot everywhere in the UK, but it's really, really hot here today.
Yeah, it's clammy, isn't it? Sticky.
I know, and I'm so grateful to everyone who's sticking with us and those who were around for a little while and have had to go. But when you're middle management in an organisation, you're having to manage your own bosses as well as being boss to other people as well, aren't you?
Oh, absolutely. I think the middle manager is the most underrated, underappreciated role that exists in an organisation, because I just don't think anyone appreciates what you're juggling. You know, you're trying to manage your own team and support their performance, development, welfare. You're trying to support actually your own managers as well. And managing up is extremely crucial, but very challenging as well, because you're trying to satisfy their wants, their desires, their aspirations, and upper management, quite rightly, in organizations, your execs, they are demanding, and that's why they're at the top of the organization, because you would hope they're there driving everyone forward, being motivational, but that comes with high demand. And then you need to look after yourself as well. And you also have your peers around you. Now, that in itself is a pressure at times too, because that's a team that you're also a part of, and you may be supporting them. I'd like to think you are if you're in an effective team, but it's not always the case. And I've worked in some very competitive environments where I've had a challenging team to look after. I've had a very challenging peer group, sadly at times quite competitive, not particularly supportive. And then I've had a challenging senior team too. And you're literally in the middle trying to resolve every issue for everybody, deliver every target and objective for everybody. And I think it's in those moments when you really have to stop and wonder, well, what am I doing for myself? Because actually, I think you can get very quickly lost in those environments. What do you stand for? What's important for you? What do you want to achieve? How do you want to work? And I have to admit, it was only through coaching that I came to that realization and understanding, because I had lost my identity. I started to no longer understand who I was, what I was really good at, what was important to me, what my boundaries were. Like, I talk about boundaries a lot for managers, because we do lose them when we're trying to please everybody else, but it's probably one of the best things we can actually do for us and those around us, actually, is to set some and make it clear, what's important, what we will do, what we won't do. Like, we are allowed to do that. I think that's the other thing that many people forget, is if you've worked for a while, if you've worked for a few years and you've achieved and you've delivered, you do start to earn, in my opinion, the right to start saying what you will and won't do, and setting some boundaries about what you also want yourself. Like, that is okay. And actually, that in itself can be a very empowering experience. I can vouch, because I've done it, and it is. I don't think I ever felt as powerful when I said no to things. But people do respect you for it, because they understand, and they suddenly realise what you're about, what you stand for, what they can come to you for, what they can't. And that's actually clarity. That's empowering for them too. It kind of builds it. But yeah, I think being a middle manager, it just shouldn't be as tough as it is. Not really. Because actually, again, you're in such an incredible position of authority, so much amazing responsibility, an opportunity to really make a difference for people as well as yourself. It should be a place to be celebrated and to celebrate, but I don't think it's always that way.
But it's also part of the thing that came up at the top of this conversation, that as a manager, just as a coach, as a manager, you're responsible for some other people's well-being.
Absolutely.
And that's, I often think that's something else that's a bit overlooked, that you've got, as a manager or a leader, you've got the opportunity to change people's lives for the better or for the worse. And that's sometimes not spotted by people along the way.
No, not at all. And look, not everyone is supposed to be a manager, and that's okay. But because we don't give many other options or guidance to people for what they could do instead to be successful still, and we put so much success around the label of manager, people do just go into that. But actually it's not for everyone, and that's okay. Like, that's no judgment there. Like, we're not all good at that sort of thing, because we're not all good at everything. And
I wish that was made
I
more
think,
clear. I wish that was made more
yeah,
clear. When I was thinking about my estate agency career, the only upward career options were to become, you went from being a negotiator to a senior negotiator, and then the next step up had the word manager in the title, and then after that, every other role in the company had the word manager in the title. And so, as when I was young, which was a while ago now, that was my aspiration, to be a manager. I never really thought about why, Lisa, but the way
yeah,
to get the next better company car, the way to get, on the company pension scheme and all of the other exciting things, was to jump up to be a manager. So I thought I wanted that without ever really thinking through that a manager had to manage. And that's, I think,
yeah.
lost on a lot of people.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, I've been fortunate. I've worked in some organisations where the structure is much flatter. It's not so hierarchical. It's the kind of older, more traditional, I think, corporate organisations where they're very hierarchical, where you get a lot of managers, and so it looks like the only obvious way is to go up, and that requires managing. Um, but I have worked for organisations that are a lot flatter, where there's a much broader range of roles, and where there's been more of a balanced rewards sort of, and recognition for, I suppose, like the obvious salary based on skills and expertise, which I think is therefore you get much more variety of role then, and it's not all about just being a manager. But equally, I do think there are a large proportion of people that actually could be really great managers, but because they were never supported to do so, they haven't become great. And unfortunately, over time, that problem has just got larger. Whereas I think actually there are many more people out there capable of managing people and doing it really well, if only they were given the skills to do it.
We're going to be here for literally a few more minutes. So if anyone's got any questions for Lisa, pop them in the comments below. If anyone's got any more questions, we've had quite a lot this afternoon. Or if anyone wants to pop any comments in or any questions in, if they're watching on replay, they will still get answered. I promise I'll tag Lisa for any other comments or questions that go in there.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
if there's someone who's new in management, Lisa, or if there's someone who's in management and feels like they are struggling, are there any particular tips that you can give them to leave with them this afternoon?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, firstly, I think it's so important to just take a moment for yourself, just get some space and prioritize it, for goodness sake, because I see too many people who would just carry on their little hamster wheels, and they just don't stop when they know that there's something not quite right. And I think the best thing you can do to start with is just stop, block half an hour. It doesn't need much longer in your diary. Go out somewhere if you're working from home, and if you're not at home and you're in the office, still go out or go to a meeting room, whatever. Just get some space and just stop and think, what is going on for me at the moment? Because if you feel like something isn't right, it's because it's not. And I would say you've got to trust your gut with things like this. You are, as I've already said throughout this conversation, you are your best source of information about yourself. So if you don't feel good, it's because something's not right. So I think it's just take a moment to have a real think about that, and to think about, what is it that is not right, and what do you want to be different. So if it's not right at the moment, what's the opposite of that? And then I would start just becoming really curious about yourself, in terms of, notice when you're getting these feelings. Is there a common theme? Is it when you're in a certain place with a certain person or a group of people, or when you're doing a certain task? And that way you can start getting a bit more clarity around, okay, what is the problem, to then know what to fix. And I think, tell somebody else. There's no shame in asking for help. I think, I was very proud in those sort of stages of my leadership career. And because I'd been promoted into it, I had convinced myself that I should therefore know what I was doing. And I held myself to that really, really harshly. And it stopped me from seeking help and just making my life a lot easier, a lot quicker. And there's no shame in asking for help. Actually, even just speaking aloud to someone you trust, whether that be a peer, a family member, partner, a best friend, whoever, aloud what you're thinking, sharing it with someone else and hearing yourself say it can give you a different perspective. Do beware of the advice trap, because those people love you and they will try and give you advice. And I think just appreciate it comes from a place of care, and maybe they will give you things that are helpful, but I think just use them as the soundboard to then see how that helps you to get some perspective on it. And if coaching sounds like something that is of interest to you, that you feel actually this could support me, this could help me right now, do your research, because as I said at the beginning, there are a lot of coaches out there. There are a lot of unqualified coaches, and it really does pay to do your due diligence, do a bit of shopping around, and find a few different individuals that you like the look of. There are a lot of us on LinkedIn, but there is some great resource out there like Credible Coach. Credible Coach is a coaching platform where you can go and access coaches who have been essentially assessed by them and validated, and they only promote qualified coaches. I myself am a Credible Coach. So, you can read their profiles, their education, you can read their client testimonials, you can see videos of them speaking. But I would urge people to go out there and just do that due diligence and set up a few different calls with coaches, have a few different conversations and just see who's right for you. All credible, qualified coaches who know their stuff and who are truly authentically doing this should offer you a free chat to start with, because it's important that as a coach, I'm matched with someone who I know I can work with. And it goes both ways. And you only know that from that initial conversation. So it's really important. And so, I offer a free conversation, to anyone who's interested in coaching and thinking about employing a coach to work with them and interested in what I do. And we go from there. And sometimes it's I'm not right, and that's okay, because I'm not going to be right for everybody. No one can be. And other times we connect and off we go. So yeah, they would probably be my key points of advice to get started on this. If you're a manager, or you want to be a manager, or you're a new manager and you're thinking something's not quite right for me and I want to get some support to be able to do this even better.
I've enjoyed this so much, and the time has absolutely flown.
Me too. It's been brilliant. I've loved it.
Thank you for your time, Lisa. Thank you to everyone who's joined us this afternoon. Just before we go, I'm going to pop Lisa's contact details back up on here. Thanks, Lisa. I always enjoy talking to you. We should just do every chat that we should have should just be public, because I think what you have to say is so valuable to everyone.
Thank you. I love our chats too.
Thank you very much. Thanks for talking to me this afternoon. If you're not following Lisa already, this is where to find her on LinkedIn, as Lisa Robyn Wood. Here's her website, Grip Coaching. You can find that as well as if you want to listen to a load of Lisa's advice, there is the Coaching Cast podcast. Just before I press the stop button, let me put that back on screen. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. I've really enjoyed the interaction from people, and I'll speak to you all